Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm going to give you 5 of my best tips for improving your photography starting from today. Let's get into it. Normally, I would be dashing around outside, either with my medium format cameras, my 35mm cameras, or even my large format cameras, taking pictures. However, I have succeeded in messing up my Achilles tendon. So for the moment, I'm actually slightly desk bound. But I think that's a really good opportunity for me to actually talk about some of the underlying principles that I use under my photography and some of the things that I've found have been successful in improving my photographs, and perhaps they might be of use to improve yours. So without any ado, let's get into my tip number 1. The first concept that I'd like us to kind of wrap our heads around is that of story. Now, we're used to saying things like, that's a really nice picture of a bowl of fruit, or that's a very nice picture of Aunt Elsie. I think it's more helpful when you want to create pictures that have impact to talk about a photograph being about something. So thinking about a photograph about a flower. Now, a photograph of a flower is a simple concept. It's just a picture of a flower. A photograph about a flower tells us something about what that flower means to us, what its history might be, what state it's in. I'll show you a photograph now that I took of a rose. And most people take a photograph of a rose to show it fresh and new. This actually shows a rose well past its best, in fact 2 roses. And the idea was it's about the stages that the rose goes through. So it's a timeline, it's a way of stretching this slice of reality that we take every time we press the shutter and making it into a story. This storytelling concept was particularly important to me when I was taking theatre photographs professionally, because in 1 or 2 or sometimes a few more, but mostly just 1 photograph that went out to the press, I had to sum up what a play was about. So I had to look very carefully at trying to tell a story within a photograph and using things to convey meaning, especially where you have people who aren't moving and you're trying to tell a story that's moving. I'm illustrating this with a couple of my photographs from that time over the top. So I think it's really important that whatever style of photography you do, I mean, it could be sports photography where you're trying to tell the story of a tennis match and getting that ball just caught in the air, about to hit the racket, or having just hit the racket and being sent back. That tells the story of the fact that there's a tennis match going on. So it's moment and telling a story and stretching that moment to make a story. I think it's really important, and I think we need to think more about stories and not just straight images. Okay, the next concept I would like to acquaint you with, number 2, is simplicity. Now, there's long since been the maxim of if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not getting close enough. Well, that's really not got anything to do with getting close. That's just got to do with excluding anything from the picture that doesn't add to the picture. And I see so many photographs by new photographers that aren't selective. Now, the human eye is selective. We tend to concentrate in on things that interest us. And because of that, we can have quite a wide field of view, but actually not be seeing all the peripheral stuff. Now, a camera has no brain, apart from the brain of us behind it. So it just takes everything in. And this is why wide-angle lenses, although they're marvellous and I love them, they are very difficult for beginners to master because absolutely everything's in there. It's a big wide view. And you usually end up with things that are far too confusing. So my mantra is simplify, simplify, simplify. Come in tight if that's the way to do it. Exclude anything that's not part of the statement that you want to make, the picture that you want to make, the story that you want to tell, harking back to point one. But come in tight and exclude anything that doesn't pertain to the main subject. Now, there are going to be people that argue that, for example, you can do an environmental portrait, which will be not using shallow depth of field to isolate the subject from the background, but taking a wide sweep with the background that shows a context for the subject. Well, that still has to be selective. You still need to manage very carefully the elements in that picture that relate to your subject, because otherwise you will lose that subject in a welter of cabbage that has absolutely no relevance to the picture. So simplify, and then simplify again, and right at the end, simplify a bit more. Concept number 3 that I'd like to talk to you about is shape. We are dealing with a two-dimensional medium with photography, whether it be on a screen or in a print. What we are producing is flat, and the world is not flat. I may take a little bit to convince a few flat earthers of that fact, but the world is not flat, trust me. And we have to try and find ways of conveying the shape of things, not just the two-dimensional outline of things, but the shape of things, the depth of things to the viewer. And that's largely going to be done by lighting and by viewpoint. Revealing the shape of an object. We all just see the shape of objects by the light that's reflected back into our eyes. So the fact that you see a ball and it darkens down on one side, and you read the fact that that is a sphere. It's in a photograph, it's a disc, but you have to make it a sphere. So you want lighting that reveals shape. Or sometimes you want lighting that maybe hides shape a little, but mostly you want lighting that reveals shape. And for that, the quality of lighting is really, really important. Portraits, for example, a good beauty technique is to use very, very soft lighting, which wraps around the subject and reveals the shape without the harsh texture that's shown up by hard lighting. Conversely, you might have a subject that is all about texture, maybe rough wood bark. So perhaps low evening, very directional side lighting might be what you want for showing up the texture of that particular subject. But you need to think about shape and how you're revealing shape within your images. Personally, I think that we, as photographers, don't spend enough time actually thinking about the quality of light that we have at a particular time. We tend to do throwaway things like, oh, it's golden hour, it's evening light, it's morning light, it's whatever. But there's a million different shades of texture that can be created by light from different sources, light that's diffused, light that's directional. It's all to do with creating shape, and that should be one of the things we think of as we go along, creating shape. The next concept number 4 that I'd like to talk about is colour. Now, you'll see me shoot an awful lot of black and white, but I love shooting colour as well. But I do see quite a lot of mistakes being made shooting colour, and I make a few of them myself. It's important to not let colour just happen to you. To use colour creatively, to manipulate isn't the word, because we all get a little bit too used, I think, to manipulating in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever program you use. That's not what I mean. I mean selective use of colour, picking colours within a photograph to suggest a mood, to maybe to shock or surprise, or to introduce harmony. Or colour is a wonderful thing. It is a unifying way that we see the world, and we can use it very, very actively to create mood. I'd recommend anybody to take a look at a colour wheel. I'll see if I can find a copy of it or something to link to here to show you the colour wheel, because colours opposite on the colour wheel resonate with each other. They create an excitement. This is why you see blue and orange used in colour coding of feature films, because those two colours are vibrant against each other and they create tension and dynamics. You can also use pastel shades to create harmony. I'll show a couple of photographs that do essentially those two opposites, create tension and create harmony. But colour is a force, and if you include too many colours, what happens usually is you end up with a sort of fruit salad that doesn't actually say a great deal. This is one of the arguments I have against, and I'll probably be shot down in flames here, against a lot of landscapes that you see nowadays that are manipulated very, very heavily to produce hyper colourful images, which bear very little relationship to life. Colour should, and most often is in the world, a splash here and a splash there, not something that saturates absolutely everything. You can look at a large green jungle canopy with a bright flower in it, and that bright flower makes the whole green canopy much more interesting and vibrant. If there had been a whole cascade of flowers, then the impact would have been lessened. So use colour carefully. Use colour by all means. I love colour, but use it carefully and use it sparingly and use it sympathetically. Right, now for the 5th and final point, and that's challenge. I think it's extremely important as photographers that we don't take the path of least resistance, that we don't just do the things that are within our comfort zone and that we find easy. I'm essentially a portrait photographer, and that means taking portraits, I just kind of fall over doing it. It's not difficult for me. What's far more challenging, for example, is to use a large format camera, as I'm using now a lot, and I'm finding that's making me think in a more creative way. And when I go back and take portraits, which I shall be again very soon, it is giving me a new perspective and a new way of looking at things. I think it's super important that all the way through we try and stay fresh by trying different things, pushing ourselves, challenging ourselves, doing things that we think we may be not even capable of doing, but having a shot at it. And that's a great way of expanding. And this challenging thing is a two-way street. I also believe that we should try and challenge our viewers. There are an awful lot of safe images around these days. Pretty pictures, I think you might call them. And I think something that's a little bit deeper and something that causes a little bit more depth of thought, that's something that maybe we should aim for. It's a throwaway world, but maybe create some things that aren't quite so throwaway. Anyway, those are my 5 points. Story, simplicity, shape, colour and challenge. And I think if you think about each of those points before you go out and take photographs, just throw them around in your mind and maybe have them there to fall back on as you try and think about what you're going to photograph. Then your photographs will pretty much start to improve immediately because they'll have a direction and they'll have a point. And I think direction and point are incredibly important in photography. Anyway, this has been a little bit of a serious episode from me. And I shall be back with some more technical stuff and some more field shooting as soon as my ankles feels better. And in general, we will be rocking onwards. So if you've enjoyed what you've seen, it'd be great if you could hit the like button. And if you want to see more, then have a think about subscribing, because it's going to do the channel a world of good. And I love hearing your comments. Do you like me chatting a little bit more about the whys and wherefores of taking photographs, or do you want more technical things? Just let me know in the comments. Anyway, it's been fantastic talking to you once again, and just remember, keep taking those photographs. Bye.